Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us for Tuesday's edition of This Day. I'm your host. My name is Andrew Mwansa. On Friday, 21st February 2026, Nkana Member of Parliament, Honorable Binwell Mpundu, formally joined the Tonse Alliance, declaring that Zambia is at a critical moment that demands unity rather than fragmented political efforts. Honorable Mpundu, who leads the Movement for Good Governance, popularly known as Chawama, announced this ambitious decision at an event addressed by Tonse Alliance President Honorable Mundubile'S. He did acknowledge his presidential ambitions, but stressed that his decision to join the Tonse Alliance was motivated by national interest rather than personal aspirations. The big question is, what happens to his political journey? Will he contest the Nkana seat, or will he go and support fully Honorable Mundubile'S? I'm going to be speaking to him right after this break. Nkana Member of Parliament, Honorable Binwell Mpundu, thank you so much for joining us on this day tonight.
Thank you very much, Andrew.
On the 21st of February, a big announcement was made that you decided to join the Tonse Alliance. What made you join the Tonse Alliance?
Well, first of all, it would be important to put a little thing, this whole thing into context. 2 years ago, precisely in December 2023, my friends and I decided to perhaps do what we thought was bridging the gap. We realized that young people over all these years have simply been used as tools in the political equation. Okay? When it comes to political violence, you call upon young people. When it comes to numbers, it's young people. When it comes to campaigns, it's young people. So we've basically been used as tools. Myself and friends who initiated this idea have actually been victims to this, kind of a situation where, having labored for our party then, which was PF, we were ignored, myself as an example, twice in the adoption of 2016, in the adoption of 2021. Despite proving that we were the most popular candidate, think of me in Nkana, JJ in Petauke, Munia in Lumezi, we were arguably, the most popular candidates. But because of politics being, young people being regarded as just tools, okay, we were ignored. So having gone through that episode or experience, we decided there were a number of young people who could face similar situations as we did. We may have had unique advantages. Myself, as an example, having been DC, I had more advantages to win. But there could be other young people who may be better leaders given an opportunity, who will not have that opportunity because there's no platform. So the current scenario in our Zambian politics has always been that young people will always be considered to be, spectators or tools, and they will not be given a chance to sit on the table of decision making. So we were bridging that gap, hence the idea of us creating a special vehicle or a platform that could then engage young people and give them that chance to go to parliament, to go to the chambers, councillors, and as mayors. So we ventured on this journey since December 2023, and boom, it got so much momentum that for once, and I've been telling people that if we were to put numbers, we could arguably be the biggest political grouping at the moment. Because when you go into our database, those who have now even managed to register with membership cards have actually exceeded 600,000. But those who have not yet, because others have struggled, so in total, we could be clocking about 1 million members. So when you look at the context of population of or sizes of political parties, we could arguably be the biggest. Except for, I know that the UPN would claim they are bigger because they got 2.8 million votes in the last election. But between you and me, you know that those who vote are not necessarily your members, because voting is based on the mood on that particular time. So it has not been an easy decision to make that we forego that advantage we sit with, having so many members under our books, to now just say, let's join our colleagues. We have had serious engagements with different stakeholders, civil society organizations, the church, traditional leaders have all called on us to not to go in alone, because then would spoil, or more or less distribute these votes among opposition members, or shares they would call it. So we came to a painful decision that we had to let go of our ambitions. Me, as an example, wanted to be president. I had to let go of my ambitions to become president, or at least shelve that ambition to now be part of a bigger group. And so this decision has been made based on the fact that we needed to unite if we were to dislodge the UPND. Because remember, the UPND have now become a common enemy amongst all of us who are on the opposite side. The UPND, for us, we believe they are an enemy to our democracy. Look at our democracy have basically been thrown into tatters. They've become an enemy to the rule of law. Unfortunately, today it's a kangaroo situation, or the animal farm situation, where some animals are more equal than the others. The economy is also in serious problems. People are hardly surviving. So we looked at the next election of August as an election that you can't go in just for numbers or to be on record that I participated and I came third. If we are to go into this election, we must win it. Now, it will be folly for us to think that we can win it alone, which is why we came to this painful decision to go into an election as an alliance, to partner with our friends so that we both can, or all can contribute the little numbers we may have. Yeah.
Don't you think you would be overrating yourself to suggest that you are the biggest political grouping in the country? Numbers don't lie. You participated in the Chawama parliamentary by-election, and the numbers that you got weren't quite impressive. And so, don't you think you are overrating yourself to suggest that possibly you are the biggest political group in the country?
Unfortunately, that subject I've made is subject to rebuttals, okay? And rebuttals would be based on many assumptions. For us, we are basing on those who have come forth and pledged to be members. And we have two categories. We have those who have jumped the line to now ultimately declare they are bona fide members by registering and getting membership card. They are in excess of 600. I think yesterday I posted what the database gave us. We are in excess of 600,000. But then we also have those who have not yet managed to cross that line, who are in excess of 400. So we proudly speak of having almost 1 million members. Now, if saying we are arguably a biggest grouping because we have 1 million is a wrong statement, then we can agree that we could be overstating. But knowing politics, there is no political grouping today that can boast of having 1 million members. There is none. I was PF myself. If you look at PF, those who would call PF were those we counted in the structures. And the structures were 24 at the province, 24 at the district, 24 in the constituencies. They still could not come close to 1 million. And this is the biggest political opposition political party. Again, I can say the same with the UPND. If you ignore those who voted in the last election not being the basis to measure the size of UPND, then you still come to the same conclusion. Now, in regards to Chawama, Chawama had got different dynamics. It had different dynamics. Number one, it was a constituency for Edgar Lungu. Ordinarily, all those people are married to the ECL family. And FDD and the Tonse alliance seems to have been what was so close to the ECL factor. Secondly, you wish to know that we appeal more to young people. This is a young people grouping. And you know what happened in Chawama is that young people were not allowed to vote because most of them are just registered. Okay, so all the numbers we could have received did not go to vote because of the rule that ECZ had put in. Secondly, or thirdly, is that even when we were going into Chawama, we had anticipated that we were not going to win it because we had not yet set up structures in Chawama as an example. Because you see, winning an election is more about structures and how much you have mobilized. That is why for us, when we say 600, we know 600, if they voted, would have 600. We don't have anything. So we don't live in illusions or insinuations that we could have so much. And that is what happened on Chawama. I remember telling my team before we announced that we were contesting, telling them that we're actually going to lose this election because we have no numbers that we can actually point to that at any given day, these are going to be our assured votes. So the results of Chawama for us was well, anticipated because we had not done the work. Does it measure what we are or the size of the movement? No, because elsewhere we've done a fantastic job in mobilization.
Like where?
Ndola as an example. Just last independence celebrations, when we say those who are ready to participate in the independence celebration, over 75,000 registered in our registers. You understand? In one district, there were over 75,000 who registered to participate.
Going by your data, do you think that if today you went into the general election as presidential candidate, with the data that you have, you think that you would amass 1 million votes?
I think we would get more, because those numbers I'm speaking to are assured numbers, or numbers that are actually on record. But we have a lot of supporters. I can bet my life that if you go to Diamond here, we can actually get 10, 20 votes here at Diamond. But some of those votes or people are actually not part of those records I'm speaking to. We are a lot of young civil servants, the women, okay? We are a lot of businessmen who are scared of coming forth to be part of our groups because of being identified and persecuted. Those forms part of those numbers that would ultimately come and vote for us and give us the numbers that I'm talking about.
There's so many political alliances at the moment. There's over 5 that I know of so far. Why Tonse, to be precise?
So I was engaged in a number of meetings with different political entities. I had engagements with one team that is under what is being called the Council of Elders. We're talking about Bachiwe Sakunda, former Chief Justice, Mr. Kashamba Nonge Wina. They formed what they're calling the Council of Elders, who are also bringing together political entities under this arrangement. There's Wawoza, there's quite a number of those political. Basakwiba is also there. So we had this conversation, and whatever they are proposing there seems to have been to be working out. So it's a good idea, because they are talking about a transition in government, where you are voted in and you give yourselves on 3 to 4 years to transition now into us having fresh elections with a new constitution. Superb, arrangement or proposal. I've had the engagements with Mr. Arikalaba, President Arikalaba of Citizen First. I've had engagements with my brother Makebi Zulu. Ordinarily, I would have loved to team up with Makebi Zulu because he's young as I am. But you see, we have been listening to many stakeholders who have pointed us to this direction that we have now made. Here I'm speaking to church leaders, I'm speaking to traditional leaders. As we speak here, I can tell you there are a huge number of traditional leaders who are pointing to that Tonse alliance. There is a huge number of church factions that are pointing to that direction. They are the ones who convinced us this is a direction to go. So let me say, without sounding unreasonable, that it looks like Mr. Mpundu, the Honorable Mpundu, may actually be leading the pack around the opposition. And that is what led us into that particular alliance.
What then does this mean for Ichabaiche? What will happen in the elections? Will you still field in candidates in different constituencies, in different wards? What exactly will happen? What are the terms of reference, for this particular alliance that you have with Tonse?
So remember, if we were going to participate in the election as Ichabaiche, we were unfortunately going to field only very strong candidates, okay, who are assured of going through. Now, we have joined an alliance with different stakeholders, political entities, if you want to call it that way. It means collectively as an alliance, we may still need to look at the most popular candidate amongst all those who will be prospecting to stand. And it won't be on the basis of, no, let's have 10 from here, 10 from there, because you can't go into an election and field candidates based on we will put 10, we'll put 10. It must be based on popularity. And if an aspiring candidate from Ichabaiche is not popular, why would we want to gamble just in the name of having a young person show up on a ballot paper. So the adoption in the alliance obviously will be based on the popularity of a particular candidate, be it that they are coming from Chawama or they are coming from any other political grouping within the alliance. It therefore should inform you that we have actually, told our members, they have to push themselves on the ground. If they are to get that recognition. Because it's one thing to want to have young people go and participate. But if we don't put in the works, it is just going to be, an attempt in futility. So we are going to participate. The young people of the movement are going to participate in the election at all levels, from councillor, mayor to MPs. They are going to participate, except only those that would have done the work we have told them to do. Because right now, as we speak, we have embarked on a massive structure reorganization and recruitment. Our idea is, in the constituents where you are aspiring, if it will mean, or it will take, or it will require 20,000 voters, you must at least show us that you've mobilized 15 by now. Okay, if you can't prove to us that you've got that, support, it is a gamble to pick on you. And you'll be amazed that the stage at which we are, reorganizing our structures and mobilizing membership, does not require so much resources or efforts. Or rather resources, let me end at resources. It just requires efforts of interested individuals. So you who is prospecting, always aspiring, all you need to do, go in the wards, create the structure. The structures begin to help you, get the necessary, followership.
What is the need for you for joining the Tonse Alliance?
Well, for me, what is the need for me is that we have given our platform, Chawama, a bigger platform. Because remember, had we gone into the election alone, we would have basically been part of the statistics. Because we haven't covered the whole country. That's the truth. We haven't been to the southern province. We have a pocket of support in some places in the southern province, Livingstone, Chawama, and Mazabuka. We have not gone to Gwembe. We have not gone to the other places. To win a general election, you need to cover ground. You need to be in all the places. So to expect that we're going to win because we are popular on the Copper Belt and Lusaka is dreaming, okay? So we needed, and I want to stress this point, to win this election or to go into this election, you can't go in just to be part of the statistics or to be part of the history or the record. You must go in to win it. And to win it, I can confess this, there's no political party standing alone today that can dislodge the UPND on their own. We need to unite. And that's unfortunately a fact we can't ignore or push aside. So we need to come together. And I pray that all of us will have at some point to leave our egos and personal interests by the door so that we align with our colleagues. Because if we go in pockets, we may split the votes and UPND is going to beat us.
Fundamentally, what would you say in principle brings you together with the Tonse Alliance besides the fact that you want to dislodge HH? Is there anything in principle that binds you together?
Yes, there is. The desire to serve this country better. Let's face it, the UPND have messed this country beyond redemption. And this can be measured in all facets. Let's look at the economy. The economy has crumbled. And you see, for me, I laugh at people that are presenting these statistics. Economic growth, inflation. Unfortunately, for a common person on the ground, economy means whatever you present as figures, as statistics, translated into the results on the ground. If I'm still buying a bag of meal at over 300, you can't tell me the GDP has improved or inflation has reduced to single digit, okay? So the economy for the common person on the ground has crumbled beyond redemption. People are hardly surviving. If you go into the communities here, families are failing to even afford 3 meals in a day, let alone 2 meals. The economy has crumbled. On the democracy front, governance has crumbled. I was seeing one picture. There were 3, leaders of the 3 arms of government. There was a president, there was the leader of the judiciary and leader of the legislature, one thing that struck me is, even when we talk about regionalism and tribalism, that picture alone tells you a complete different story. So we are doing, the UPND are doing so bad in these, spaces, economy, national unity. You have heard the president go to Southern Province as an example, where he claims he's hated because he comes from Wengwa. Now, ideally, what that means is that the other tribes hate him. Now, that's a very dangerous statement to be made by the president. And that we have seen even businesses, promotions, employment are based on, some form of alignment. You must align to this for you to get these opportunities. When you talk about corruption as an example, because broadly we can speak about governance issues, corruption. The Financial Intelligence Center records shows from 2022 up to date, the corruption, figures have surged to over 500%. Now, we knew that PF was corrupt, and the reason why they were kicked out. This government has gone beyond 500 in terms of quantums of corruption, figures. Okay? If we talk about the, dreaded cadarism, when people thought by pronouncement UPND would deal with cadarism, it is so rife now, except it's cladded, or rather it's a bit subtle, compared to PF that used to be so loud with cadarism. These are subtle but very lethal. Okay, we have reached a point where cadres can actually abduct you and torture you, on cameras. Okay, so things have gone haywire. People can hardly, survive. Businesses are falling apart. When I say businesses, I'm speaking to the smaller businesses, the local businesses. Every businessman you speak to today is not having it easy, but the foreign businesses are having a field day, because government has provided incentives for the bigger boys, okay, to an extent where the government had to even, forego the tax we would get from the export of copper, when they allowed, mining companies to be exporting copper concentrate without paying duty. So you can see that government has gone out of its way to facilitate for incentives for foreign businesses, but the local businesses are struggling. They are closing up. Remember, we endured almost 3 years of load shedding that killed almost all the smaller businesses. Miraculously, we are having, power almost 24 hours today. We call it the election gymnastics. Okay, we have endured high prices of fuel, plus the unavailability of the same commodities. Not only is fuel very high in prices, it is also not available in most times. So these, unfortunately, are things that have made it so difficult for people to really want to entertain the idea of UPND ever returning.
The new Dawn government would strongly argue with you, fundamentally, especially on the economy. They say they inherited a broken economy, which they have managed to fix. They inherited a mountain of debt, which they've managed to restructure. Today, the economy is growing at an average of 5.2% and expected to grow at 6.5% as of end of December. Inflation has been reduced to a single digit, now at 9.4. 2 weeks ago, we had a press briefing from the Zambia Association of Manufacturers, who stated that the prices of commodities, 30 industries have agreed, and more are on board now to reduce prices of commodities because the economy is cooling and the economy is performing well. So when you say that these numbers are not translating to the living conditions of our people, then probably you're not saying the truth, because prices are reducing. Honorable Mpundu.
So let's do these, comparisons. Okay. So you are saying that they've fixed the economy that was broken. They've dealt with, the debt, the mountain of debt that was left by UPND.
By PF.
Now, or rather by PF. I'll challenge you as an example. PF left the external debt at $11.9 billion. The debt today stands at 20 billion. Are you aware? Now, that tells you, because PF inherited a country that had around 2 billion debt externally. 2 billion. They left when the debt was about 11.9. So meaning that PF contracted about $9 billion in how many years? 10. Right? UPND has pushed the debt to 20 billion as we speak externally. The internal debt was around 187 billion kwacha, where PF left it. We are now at 252 billion kwacha, now after 4 years. So by all manner of comparisons, the UPND have borrowed the same quantums of debt that PF borrowed in 10 years, but for them only in 5 years. Now, if we are to compare prudency, PF had so much to show for the debt they contracted. As an example, 3 major international airports are standing. One in Ndola, one the sausage one you call in Lusaka, and the Livingstone one. Massive infrastructure out of the debt. PF put up massive infrastructure in terms of hospitals and schools. PF also left a good number of projects in the generation of power. An example, the last one they left is the Kafue Lower Gorge, which was about $2 billion from China. All right? So when you look at the usage, oh, by the way, in terms of road networks, here in Lusaka for the first time, you even have, you got the Mama flyover area, right? Okay? So at least our friends with the $9 billion they contracted in 10 years, there's so much to point at. Our friends have borrowed 8.1 precisely in 4-5 years. What have they shown for that?
You've been part of the team that has been approved this date through the
Public
Debt Management Act. What have you been approving this date to go towards?
I think you have heard me debate every year in, every year out, arguing against the borrowing. The last time, I was actually challenging why they were borrowing almost 6 billion in one fiscal year. Interestingly, when they promised that they would borrow on concessional terms, they've reverted back to borrowing, from commercial entities at commercial interest terms. So when you do these comparisons, the debt of PF with so much to show and the quantums at 9 billion after 10 years, then you compare with UPND that has borrowed over 8 billion in 4 years with nothing to show. Honestly speaking, even a child can see that the UPND are a mess. When you talk about inflation as an example, dropping to single digit, nobody will tell you, I'm not an economist. I have learned a lot through reading books that the problem we have with the inflation and the pronouncement thereof is that when was the last time that the major factor in determining inflation was ever addressed, which is the price index? For the last 15 years, we've never adjusted our consumer price index. So how is it that we are arriving at the correct assumption of what our inflation is? Now, these are basic economic factors that we, at least even if we didn't study economics, would tell that here, these are but semantics or figures being presented or fronted in the faces of the people. That is why real economic growth or economic performance is measured by the realities on the ground. When you speak to ZAM, I'll challenge ZAM, what commodities have reduced on the market as we speak? Tell me.
Because millimil?
How much is millimil fetching? Because from where I stand, millimil is still fetching at over 300 kwacha in most stores. Okay, so there's no correlation with the statements people are making and the realities on the ground. That is why you have a country where you have foreign reserves, as an example, in excess of $5 billion. By the way, which reserves are actually kept offshores, not in your country. But then those reserves, when we have emergencies, they are not used. Because why do you have reserves? We endured a 3-year period of load shedding with huge reserves of foreign, denominated currencies. We had a situation, unfortunately, when we speak of corruption, where our people were subjected to high prices of fuel for 3 years, manipulated figures. It was discovered when the pipeline was now open for others to access it that we were paying agro-fuel 3 times the price. Okay, so UPND allowed, despite all the outcry, the Zambian people to be paying for fuel 3 times higher the price. When you speak about corruption. Okay, so in all fairness, when you speak to these figures, there's no relationship to what is on the ground. If you ask or you tell those figures to any common person on the ground, they can actually insult you because it's mockery.
Does the Tonse Alliance have a manifesto?
They do. They do, and what is happening interestingly is, and which is what I've told people, that, you know, it is folly for Zambians to think that one politician would have solutions to all the problems we have. In fact, to suggest that solutions lies with the politicians is actually beating ourselves, you know, hammering ourselves in our foot. Solutions should lie with the citizens. The only missing link is, let's bring those citizens together so that we can tap into their exposure, into their understanding and all this. So when you have an alliance, you have an opportunity to tap into the different brains. As an example, we as Chawama had a manifesto. Okay? Beautiful manifesto I'll be able to share, which we are now taking to the table of the Tonse. Honorable Mundubile'S had a manifesto. And these other entities. So now imagine what is going to happen, because now all the stakeholders will now to sit down to look at what was beautiful in Chawama's manifesto, what was beautiful in our brands, and we consolidate that into a beautiful or something that will be of, you know, great success to this country. As an example, you know we are youth aligned. The solutions we have for young people are unmatched. We have a blueprint for how we are going to tackle young people. So if you listen to Mundubile'S speaking to young people yesterday, before we joined, wait until you listen to him speak to the issue of young people now that we've joined. Because we've now brought our agenda on the table. And he's loving those agendas. That is the beauty of putting heads together.
You consistently speak of how prices of commodities have skyrocketed. What are your solutions to bringing the price of milling meal down?
Well, unfortunately, there are a number of things that we may have to do, some of which we may have to consider price controls, especially on essential commodities. Milling meal, as an example, government should actually go in and control. Back in the days and in many other countries, governments do come in, despite being a liberalized economy, that we push in controls. The other thing, why our people feel that the prices are so high is because of the size of their pockets. Okay? If you are working and you get 2,000 kwacha and the price of milling meal is 400 kwacha, you obviously complain because you are basing that on the price of the size of your pockets. Imagine if we double the size of your pockets, would you be able to cry foul over the price of milling meal? So the other measure that may have to happen is, let us have, you know, policies that helps, you know, workers get decent, you know, conditions of service. As an example, my dear brother, pay has been a very thorny issue for many years. This government has got the capacity to be able to reduce the pay-as-you-earn, you know, charges on our workers.
So just wait before you go to pay. So you're saying that part of the measures that you're thinking about is price control?
Yes.
In a free market economy?
Yes. They are everywhere you go. There exists strategic.
How exactly do you want that to work out? So
listen, they are everywhere you go. There are goods that are of significant importance that affects every citizen, that you, as government, you have no option but to step in to regulate. Fuel was an example. It was folly of the UPND to have relegated the control of the fuel subsector completely to the private sector. No wonder we are in this position where the commodity is erratic in supply and the prices are beyond the control of government. When government is in the game of fuel, as the case were in the past, government would actually regulate the price. So the controls that government can play or can institute would go as far as government being involved. As an example, milling meal. If you want to regulate the price of milling meal as government, you may have to step in. produce the meal meal, because the other players would follow suit when you reduce the price. So those are some of the controls that exist in a liberalized economy, where government steps in. In the fuel subsector, as an example, all these years from Bakaunda's time, we had Ndeni and Tazama. The reason why we had those strategic institutions were for government to be regulating this commodity. Because the external players, the private sector, cannot peg the price higher than what the government is offering. If anything, government is able to offer at a cheaper price. Okay?
You don't think
those are measures.
Government mustn't be involved in the business of doing business?
Government cannot stay away from such important business, and it is extremely suicidal, and we have actually lived the experience. I have been consistently hammering this point from 2021. The decision of the UPND government to step out of the fuel subsector was reckless. Everywhere we've gone, and I say this passionately because I'm part of the Energy Committee at Parliament, we have done benchmarking tours to understand how our friends in the other regions are managing the fuel subsector or the energy sector in totality. And we've discovered there's no government in the world that steps away from the fuel subsector, because the fuel is like your blood. Without your blood, you can't function. Okay? So if fuel is so important that the engine of the economy would collapse, why would government step out and leave that lifeline to a private player? As the case was, you give agrofuel, they start charging you 3 times the price of that commodity. Who suffers? Your people. Government through Ndeni and Tazama should not step away. That's why you see them now coming back. By the way, as we speak, government is now considering through the 2025 and 2026, building another pipeline. In fact, not just one pipeline, 2, 3 pipelines to be bringing in, those commodities, because they converted Tazama into a single pipeline, carrier from, the multiple pipeline, to a point where to even get jet fuel today, you have to sweat. So we became a hand-to-mouth, or we have actually become a hand-to-mouth country. When you need jet fuel, you have to go to Tanzania. I spoke one day that this decision will hurt us one day. Peradventure, there's trouble in Tanzania. Didn't we see trouble in Tanzania? We saw it, and at that point, we had massive shortages of fuel in the country. So these, unfortunately, I don't speak like a sangoma. I speak out of experience and out of research that we do what is obtaining elsewhere. According
to you, said the price of minimum is very high. What is the acceptable price that you feel Zambians must buy this commodity?
Andrew.
Because the UPND are selling it at 245.
Andrew, this is a country with massive arable land. This is a country with the biggest water bodies, freshwater bodies. This is a country that has got raw materials that can produce fertilizers and everything else. In fact, even if we don't do with these fertilizers, we can actually even do natural organic fertilizers, and we can actually produce massively. If you produce massively, the price of mealie meal can go down to 100 kwacha. So if you were to ask me, the fair price of mealie meal should be 100 kwacha per 25 kg.
Is that what you're promising the Zambians tonight?
Look, for now, I've just joined the Tonse, but that is the idea we had as Ichabache, which we are now trying to share with our alliance partners, that it is possible that we can actually reduce the price of maize. The other way you reduce the price of maize to that position I'm mentioning is allow as many to get involved in the production. You know that these farmers, the FISIP farmers, they don't buy mealie meal from the market. They basically go and they don't actually feel the pain of paying those exorbitant prices. So if you have as many people producing, the demand for the commodity will be low and the price will come down. After all, the semantics of an economy or market semantics entails that when there's too much demand, the price would go up, right? So work on reducing the demand by making sure that government supports as many farmers beyond the 1 million who are already on FISIP. Let's have 5 million farmers. Because then we'll reduce the demand, and if we reduce the demand, the price will also go down automatically.
So from the arithmetic that you've done, the right price must be
100 kwacha.
Must be 100 kwacha.
100 kwacha.
The elections are coming up in the next less than 200 days. What will happen to you as Honorable Binwell Mpundu? Will you contest as a member of parliament, or will you campaign for the presidential candidate who is Brian Mundubile?
I am now part of the bigger picture or the bigger plan. I am not going into Nkana. I've done my part. I wish the people of Nkana can now pick a better person than me. I've done my homework. I've did what I promised I would do. I think that now there's a calling that I must step up and help at a bigger platform. So I will be helping, galvanize support for the Tonse Alliance across the country. So I'll be freelancer.
You're not available for Nkana?
No, I'm not available for now.
Not available for now?
No.
The UPND and President Hakainde Hichilema have always challenged the opposition that you must clearly stipulate to the Zambians what alternative you have to free education, what alternative you have to CDF, what alternative you have to partial withdrawal, the school feeding program. What message are you going with as Tonse Alliance, as the Chawama, in the elections of August?
First of all, I don't think that it will be of help to the people if we took away free education. What I believe that free education is a good thing, except it must be made better. Now, free education, number one, needs to be supported by infrastructure. Today we have children that are sitting in one classroom, 200 children. It is compromising the quality of education. So we need to supplement what UPND has been able to do by way of extending the free education to tertiary institutions. There are very few children today who have qualified to go to a tertiary institutions who are managing to actually go, especially if their parents cannot afford. So the true meaning and benefit of free education must be to extend free education all the way to tertiary institutions. And when I say tertiary, it should not be restricted to private, rather public institutions. It should be to all institutions, because every child deserves to be educated by its government. And it must be supplemented by a good environment, school environment, meaning let's build more facilities, and let's also bridge up the gap between the teachers and the pupils. Because how does one teacher manage a classroom of 200 pupils? How does he even manage? Secondly, you see, the free education is actually being negated by the prices of commodities. Remember, when we say free education, we are saying a parent is spending nothing to educate their children. Today, parents are paying or are spending more money, Andrew, to send their children to school than in the previous governments when they used to pay 200 kwacha per term. Remember, the uniforms then were cheaper. So in terms of amounts parents were spending then, and the amounts they are spending now to buy the books, uniforms, bags, and shoes, they are spending way too much money than they used to spend under PF, because under PF the prices were relatively affordable. So all these must be balanced. It's called the balancing acts. You do this, you support it with these others. When you speak to...
But are you sure on that, Honorable Mpundu? Because if you're taking your child to a public school, you're not compelled to... In fact, the public schools even refuse to sell you uniforms. They say, go and find a cheaper uniform at the market. And this is where you find cheaper uniforms at the market.
Yeah, but how much is that cheaper? So the context I'm putting, Andrew, is for me as a child, when you tell me it's free for my child, you are literally telling me if I get 2,000 kwacha as my end of month pay, nala kasunga 200 2,000 kwacha for food and others. But if from my 2,000 kwacha nala miapo for bags, for shoes, for books, how is it free to me? It is not free. All you have done to me is don't pay this 200 kwacha that you used to pay under PF. By the way, even when we make these comparisons, under PF, children were not paying from grade 1 up to grade 7. It was free. UPND has only brought free education from grade 8 to 12. Me, I'm proposing let's push it from grade 12 to tertiary, right? But we are saying let's complement it, because under PF, as an example, parents were paying 200 kwacha for a grade 8 child per term, meaning that per year they were paying 600 kwacha. Now, how much are parents spending? Because then they used to spend 600 kwacha per year for a child, plus the books, the uniforms, bags, and that. But look at how much that was. You can even Google and see how much was the bag, how much was that. We take the average butter, okay? Because that's how you can measure, because you can't measure from the market because you know differing prices. You can take butter. How much was butter prices for books, bags then and now? So when you tell me as a parent how much I was spending and how much I'm spending now, I'll tell you I was spending less then. But we are not rubbishing the pronouncements or the introduction of free education from grade 8 to 12. It's a good move. It must be sustained, but it must be complemented by these associated acts.
So, yes. So for you, you are proposing that we must expand this free education to tertiary. Who is going to finance this education? How is it going to be financed?
Currently, government pays for students who qualify to go to universities under the loans board. Except now we have introduced the concept of them coming to pay back. It's a loan scheme. We are suggesting that loan scheme be expanded to include every eligible student, be it in private and public. Now, what should happen is that, number one, government must increase the funding. Number two, introduce the private sector into the picture. If it's a loan, it means somewhere, somehow, somebody will pay back, right? So, if you brought in the private sector, they can supplement. Besides, government should push in more money. Don't we have money? We do have money. All we need to is to cut on the corruption, because most of the money we have is going into the pockets of the UPND leaders. That is why you see the Matogeti, but they are collecting, Kwisa, they are collecting. That money must be saved to go into such initiatives so that children can go to school.
Nkana Member of Parliament, Honorable Binwell Mpundu, thank you so much for making the time to be with me on this day tonight.
Andrew, thank you very much.
All the best.
Thank you very much.